You will hear two university students talking about a music course. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 3. In the exam, you would have 15 seconds to look at the questions. Pause the recording for 15 seconds now. Now listen and answer questions 1 to 3.
Josie, come in. How are you?
I'm good.
Can I get you a coffee or anything?
No, that's okay. I can't stay long, but you said you wanted to talk to me about that course I'm doing this semester, Music 103?
That's right. Actually, I was a bit confused because I thought you were majoring in maths.
That's right, I am. I'm doing 4 maths modules this year, but it's an optional course. You just choose it if you're interested, and you can do it whatever department you're in. Why? Are you thinking about doing it?
Well, I'm not sure. What are the requirements?
What?
The course requirements. I mean, what do I need to know about music to be accepted on it? I do listen to a lot of music, everything from hip-hop and rap to classical. And I can sing, sort of.
Well, for a start, one special thing about this course is that it's distance learning. You don't actually have to be at the university to do it, and you don't have lectures. So you've got to be able to work on your own without someone telling you what to do all the time.
Oh? Oh. No, that should be okay, I reckon. I'm more worried about the actual musical stuff. Like, I don't know how to read music.
That doesn't matter. They don't assume that. You'll learn as you go along. How's your maths?
Not too bad.
Right. Some of it's quite mathematical, so you really need to be strong there.
But you play the violin, don't you? I don't play anything.
You don't need to. What about computer skills? You're okay there?
Yes, reasonably. Does that matter?
Yes, I'd say they're essential. Like I said, it's all distance learning, so it's computer-based.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 4 to 10. In the exam, you would have 25 seconds to look at the questions. Pause the recording for 25 seconds now. Now listen and answer questions 4 to 10.
But what about lectures?
You don't attend any. It's all online. So lots of the students aren't here in Canada at all. They're studying from home all over the world. We've got someone from my group in Jamaica and a couple from Taiwan. Oh, and some from Hong Kong as well.
So how does it work?
Oh, well, there's a multimedia course website on the internet where you can listen. You can listen and watch at the same time. And of course, you can do it at your own pace. So if you don't understand something, you just go back. Or if you want some more examples of the music, there are links there to things that you can listen to. There's quite a lot of theory, but it's all done through musical examples, so it's practical at the same time. Like in the last module I did, we looked at a bit of the music from the movie Star Wars. The Darth Vader theme, you know.
Dum, 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 dum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then we looked at a theme from Wagner's Tristan and Isolde. Do you know it? Written in the 1850s. And we could see there were all sorts of parallels between them. And that's a feature of the course. We often look at modern Hollywood themes to illustrate concepts in classical music.
It sounds really interesting. Do you have a course book?
No, we don't use one. We're given a software program called Notability Lite, and what it does is it presents what we write, the music we write, really clearly. And it also allows us to play back any piece of music on our computer at home. But that's not all. We can write our own music, quite complex stuff for various instruments, and the program plays it back to us.
Plays the actual music?
Yes, So it means that your computer is actually your own musical instrument. And we can even submit our finished pieces to our tutor by email.
So you do need your own computer, obviously.
Yes, with at least 64 megabytes of RAM.
That's okay. I've got 128.
Oh, and a CD-ROM and a sound card, of course.
No problem. So, how long is the course?
It's 6 months. There are 2 a year, so you could actually enroll for the next one if you wanted. It starts in January. I started last September and I finish in February.
And how many credits is it?
3. In order to pass, you've got to do 6 assignments. I'm just doing my 4th one now, and take a final examination. Anyway, why don't you call round sometime and I'll show you the sort of things we do. You can even listen to some of my music.
That would be great. Well, thanks, Josie. Now, are you sure you don't have time for that coffee?
Now turn to Section 2. Section 2. You will hear a parent educator talking about childhood accidents. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 16. Listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 16.
I'm sure you are all aware that babies, infants, and children are exposed to an enormous number of potentially serious accidents all the time. Accidents where vehicles are involved are always awful, but particularly so when children are injured. Now, of course, most should never happen, but unfortunately, the casualty lists increase every year. It still surprises me that so many youngsters fall from shopping carts, for example. With small children, however, the highest proportion of accidents will occur inside the house or in the backyard. Many of the risks are obvious, but are often ill-considered, even in well-organized homes. Older children are exposed to a greater number, for they are also open to the hazards of the adult world. This should be kept well in mind by parents. Education is vital. There are some very good television shows which do the job quite well, but children should be educated from the moment they learn to crawl. And so I'd say the best teachers are parents, who can instill safety habits in the responsive minds of their children by constant repetition. In this way, they will gradually learn to avoid the danger zones. Of course, if they go to preschool, there'll be fewer hazards there, but I'm going to cover a few of the important household areas now. Firstly, kitchen hazards. The family kitchen is actually no place for a child, although children may spend a lot of time there with their mothers. All I can say is never leave saucepans on stoves with their handles jutting out. It's easy for little hands to seize hold of them, and adults can even catch themselves on them too. Scalding is a serious issue for grown-ups and children alike. If you are transporting dangerous items about the kitchen, always look to see where children are standing. Hot items are naturally high risk. Cooking with an infant at your feet can be very dangerous. Be careful with sharp and heavy objects as well. And not the least of dangers is treading on the child, or their hands or feet at any rate. Let's move on to poisoning now. An amazing number of household items are potentially lethal to babies but are often carelessly left around. Bleach, drain cleaner, and similar items should be kept out of reach of infants, who have no idea of their risks. And a word of warning here, never reuse juice bottles as containers for lethal fluids, and never leave these items within access of infants. Playground equipment deserves a mention too. Even in the most skillfully designed playground, accidents occur. We all enjoy the seesaws, but do make sure that they are evenly balanced. Personally, I don't understand the attraction of the roundabout. It makes me feel sick to my stomach, but the little ones enjoy the ride. Swings are great fun, but children just don't understand the danger of a swing suddenly coming back and striking a standing child. The results are often big bruises or even broken bones. Fractured skulls are the worst playground injuries I've seen, and these are common when young ones fall from a height such as the top of a climbing frame. I think the slides are much safer. Whatever your preference, though, be sure to keep a watchful eye on your children in the playground.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 17 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 17 to 20.
We're up to bath time now. You know that you should never leave a baby alone in a bath, because it's possible for babies to drown in a few centimeters of water. But how many of you have been tempted to go and grab the phone when it rings? My advice to you is to let it ring. And remember when you're filling the bath to put cold water in before the hot to prevent severe scalding, in case baby climbs in before it's ready. Moving on to electrical dangers, first of all, power points. These have a fascination for toddlers, and they'll shove things into the holes like hairpins, nails, screwdrivers, you name it. Points should always be fitted with protective plugs to prevent this. Teach children to respect all electrical appliances because they are all potential hazards. Do I need to mention cigarettes? Unfortunately, I still see parents smoking in spaces where their children have to inhale the cigarette smoke. We all know the dangers of secondhand smoke. But even leaving a packet of cigarettes within reach is dangerous because eating just one cigarette may poison a small child. If quitting the habit is too difficult, please ensure all tobacco products are kept out of reach and smoke outside. Lastly, given our cold winters, I need to warn you about heating systems. Open fires and heaters must be covered by protective devices. Even radiators and other sources of heat, which are attractive to children, can cause a nasty burn on sensitive young skin. Remember, there is never a good time to leave infants by themselves in a room where there is an unprotected source of heat.
That is the end of Section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to Section 3. Section 3. You will hear a conversation between Carlos, Melissa, David and Simona. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 30. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 30. Okay, everyone. Let's look at what presentation tips we come up with for our next seminar, Melissa.
Okay, here's my first tip. Show up early. Some experienced presenters say that something good is bound to happen. I'm not sure about that, but...
Well, you may have a chance to head off some technical problem. Also, at the beginning, before you actually begin your presentation, people filter in slowly. It's a great time to introduce yourself.
Can't argue with that. Simona has some ideas about opening.
Have a strong opening. I picked up a few ideas for structuring your opening. First, never apologise. If you're worried the presentation won't go well, keep it to yourself and give it your best shot. Besides, people are usually too preoccupied with their own problems to notice yours.
I like that.
Open by addressing the following 3 questions. What's the problem? Who cares? What's your solution?
Excellent suggestion. David, you've gone quiet. Well, my next suggestion is PGP. That means that with every subtopic, you should move from the particular to the general and back to the particular. Even though the purpose of a subtopic is to convey the general information, bracing it with particulars is a good way to draw attention and promote retention.
I've got another one. This might not be a tip so much as a law. Give everyone at least one piece of paper. A piece of paper is a record from your presentation. People can use that to help recall the details of the presentation, or better yet, to tell others about it.
The next tip I have is know your audience. This is, of course, a general piece of advice for public speaking. See if you can find out what styles of information a presentation they are most familiar and comfortable with. Adapting your presentation to those styles will leave fewer barriers to the direct communication of your material.
I like that idea. We mentioned possible technical problems before. My next point is that maybe speakers should rethink the overhead projector. Is one really necessary?
I think that often is, but I agree with your basic point, Simona. Don't use one just because it's there. Maybe a good tip is to consider carefully what you're putting on your slides.
Yes, David, that's a very good point to make. Slide content is, well, you don't want too much, too little. Carlos?
Good point, both of you. Another point I have is to respect the audience. Don't condescend by dumbing down your lecture. Show them respect by saying what you believe and what you know to be the whole story.
I also have a point about humour. I think that humour is generally good, but be careful with it. Humour in a presentation works best when it actually drives the presentation forward. If you find you're using canned jokes that don't depend on the context of the presentation, eliminate them. David?
Maybe, Melissa, but always be very careful about jokes that put down a class of people. If you're going to alienate your audience, do it on the merits of your content.
Also, avoid masculine or even feminine pronouns as universals. It can be a nuisance to half the audience. As universals, use the plural they. The Oxford English Dictionary has allowed they as a gender-neutral singular pronoun for years.
Thanks, Simona. Thinking towards the end, take care with the questions. Many people judge the quality of your talk not by the 20 minutes of presentation, but on the 30 seconds you spend answering the question. Be sure to allow long pauses for questions. 10 seconds may seem like a long pause when you're at the front of the room, but it flows naturally from the audience's point of view.
Let people know you believe your material. Speak with conviction. Believing your subject matter is one of the best ways to speak more effectively.
Finish early, and something good is almost bound to happen. If nothing else happens, people will be able to leave early, and suddenly they'll have an extra couple of minutes to do things they didn't think they'd get to. People will really like you if you do that.
I think we have missed the key point. Practice. Practice over and over and over. If you can, record your presentation. Play it back and watch yourself. You'll discover 1,000 horrible things you never knew about yourself. Now watch it again without the sound. Why are your hands flying around like that? Now listen to it with the picture. Get rid of those ums. Now watch it at twice the normal speed. This emphasizes low-frequency cycles in your gestures. David, those were excellent points. I have one more, something quite simple, but often overlooked. I read that the two most dehydrating things you can do in a modern civilization are live presentations and air travel. I don't know if it's really true, but the message is that the way to stay sharp is to drink a lot of water. Take care of your body, especially your voice. If possible, avoid alcohol too.
So, we've got to organise these points now.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to section 4. You will hear a woman giving a lecture about the positive effects of laughter. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Listen carefully to the lecture and answer questions 31 to 40.
Good morning, everyone. I do hope you didn't get too wet getting here this morning. The subject for my talk, I think we could all do with some to take our minds off this atrocious weather, is laughter. The laughter I want to look at is specifically related to psychological therapy and the treatment of physiological disorders, something we've been looking at over the last week or so. Now, when we start talking about psychological therapy, laughter isn't something that immediately springs to mind. Therapy is a serious business, and it's generally approached with an appropriate degree of seriousness. After all, people seek treatment and enter therapy for serious reasons. They're often at critical junctures in their lives, and they need professional help. The question is, how is it that laughter can be such a vital part of the therapy process? It's normally identified with humour, and thus generally deemed appropriate only in lighter, more frivolous circumstances, when it's acceptable to find a situation funny. Perhaps this is why so many people in the medical world feel that laughter's frequently misunderstood and undervalued as a cathartic, healing process. Now, humour certainly is one trigger for laughter, but it isn't the only trigger. If we take as a starting point the fact that laughter is a physical process that releases emotional pain, it follows that stress, anxiety, and tension may prompt the same response. Psychologists frequently point out that humans don't laugh because they're happy. They're happy because they laugh. Once we accept that laughter and pain are related, we are less likely to be shocked when people laugh in all sorts of painful, even tragic situations. Cathartic psychotherapy utilizes laughter as an essential medium for healing emotional pain. It's specific to the release of anger, fear, and boredom. When people laugh, they free themselves of painful feelings. The amount of pain the body releases during a single burst of laughter is immeasurable, But we know that the body will keep discharging pain cathartically until there's no longer a need. The only obstacle to the process is the self-constraint we learn to impose on ourselves during our early years. We're taught the virtues of self-control from infancy, and any loss of that control during an emotional outpouring is discomforting. We fail to realize that when we lose control, we actually gain in many other ways. Our cultural preference for processing feelings cognitively, instead of feeling them physically, maintains and prolongs emotional distress. Patients who have had upbringings during which feelings were suppressed may have quashed their ability to laugh, cry, and become angry. Clinicians can help individuals regain these cathartic processes, enabling them to release deep-rooted emotions that may be an obstacle to happiness. Only now has research begun to validate the notion that emotions are stored in the body rather than the mind. Recently developed cathartic techniques allow practitioners to teach patients how to access their hidden emotions and release them. The more catharsis the patient experiences, the more rapidly he or she progresses through the healing process. Laughter is probably the least threatening cathartic process, at least to the person expressing the laughter, and so it has an essential role. It's often a stepping stone to other forms of emotional release, like crying or showing rage. So why, you might ask, has the mental health community been so slow to accept laughter as a healing tool? Well, for reasons I've already outlined. Like any expression of the true self, laughter is radical and revolutionary, and laughing at what is seemingly misfortune upsets conformity. We in the medical professions must challenge the antiquated view that adult laughter is silly and inappropriate. We have to ensure that patients don't reject the healing power of their laughter, in the fear that others will see them as making light of their issues. Traditionally, mental health practitioners have viewed laughter as a way of hiding painful emotion. In contrast, cathartic psychotherapy understands that laughter releases emotion. Through laughter, feelings erupt from within into the outside world. If people suppress laughter, they also stifle the release of pain. The catharsis of laughter doesn't change people's circumstances, but it does change the way people relate to those circumstances. It enables them to take a different view, a view from which terrible misfortune can seem so much more bearable. This allows people to remember, to feel, and to explore without fearing that they'll be trapped by what they can't control. Life's most tragic events often have an essence of absurdity, and this can be the trigger point for laughter. Some people deal with emotional pain instinctively and come along to therapy already laughing and crying. There are many others, however, that need assistance.
That is the end of section 4.